Chuck Norris Jokes Part 26. Chuck Norris can have a conversation in sign language blindfolded. When Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone, he had 2 missed calls from Chuck Norris. Banks take loans from Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris plays basketball with a bowling ball. Superman and Chuck Norris get into a fight. The bet was whoever loses has to wear red underwear over their clothes. Chuck Norris can speak Braille. If you want a list of Chuck Norris's enemies, just check the extinct species list.
Chuck Norris uppercutted a horse. Now they're called giraffes. Stephen Hawking once stood up to bow down to Chuck Norris. Once Chuck Norris didn't go to work for 2 days, that is now known as the weekend. Chuck Norris took a lie detector test, and the machine confessed to everything. Chuck Norris had a dream about fighting a 30-foot snake. He woke up with his hands in his pants. Chuck Norris was born at an old age. Chuck Norris can speak French and Russian. Chuck Norris got bitten by a king cobra snake. After 5 days of excruciating pain, the king cobra died. When Chuck Norris went to court, he sentenced the judge to jail. Chuck Norris can do a wheelie on a unicycle. Chuck Norris doesn't have a good computer. The computer is just scared to lag. Chuck Norris doesn't flush the toilet, he scares the shit out of it. Chuck Norris doesn't have hair on his balls because hair can't grow on steel. When Chuck Norris works out, he doesn't get stronger. The machine does. If you don't follow us, Chuck Norris will be under your bed tonight.
Did you know that I got bit by a king cobra? But after 5 days of agonizing pain, the cobra died.
Chuck Norris doesn't turn on the shower. He stares at it until it cries. When Chuck Norris went to therapy, the therapist told all of his problems to Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris once visited the Virgin Islands. They are now just called the Islands. The first man who created the telephone had 2 missed calls from Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris knows Victoria's Secret. When the Google employees have a question, they ask Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris welcomed Neil Armstrong on the moon. Chuck Norris wakes his alarm clock up in the morning. Chuck Norris calls 911 and asks what their emergency is. Chuck Norris can pause online games. If you're not following us, Chuck Norris will pull his pants down and show you his favorite game. Chuck Norris was once bitten by a cobra snake. After 3 long days of suffering, the snake died. When Chuck Norris does a push-up, he pushes the earth down. Chuck Norris can slam a revolving door. Before he goes to sleep, the boogeyman checks under his bed for Chuck Norris. When Chuck Norris was born, he drove his mother home from the hospital. Chuck Norris doesn't dial the wrong number. You answer the wrong phone. When Chuck Norris falls out of a boat, he doesn't get wet. The water gets Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris can unscramble an egg. Chuck Norris was shot on Wednesday. They held the bullet's funeral on Friday. Chuck Norris doesn't wear a watch. He decides what time it is. Jesus can walk on water, but Chuck Norris can swim on land. Once a rumor spread that Chuck Norris had been beaten up by a pirate. This rumor was started by Chuck Norris himself to lure more pirates in. Chuck Norris gets more head than a pillow. Chuck Norris recently had the idea to sell his urine as a canned beverage. The drink is now called Red Bull. Chuck Norris's pet hamster can kick a pit bull's ass. Before Chuck Norris left for college, he looked his dad in the eyes and said, "You're the man of the house now." Chuck Norris can slam a revolving door. Chuck Norris uses pepper spray as perfume. They asked Chuck Norris how many push-ups can he do. He said all of them. Chuck Norris doesn't call the wrong number, you answer the wrong phone. Chuck Norris doesn't have a shadow because it's too scared to follow him. I once had a dream that I got into a fight with Chuck Norris. I woke up with a black eye and a broken arm. Bigfoot claims he once saw Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris is so tough. There's no chin under his beard. There is only another fist. Chuck Norris has a bridge named after him, but no one has ever used it, because no one ever crosses Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris can pause online games. When Chuck Norris punched a mirror, his reflection had a black eye. When Chuck Norris goes to your house to visit you, you're the guest. Follow me for daily jokes.
Chuck Norris once waved at blind people, and they waved back. When Chuck Norris tells a joke, even deaf people laugh. Chuck Norris makes the teacher raise their hand before they talk. Chuck Norris can eat a Popeye's biscuit without water. Chuck Norris once was shot, and 9 days later the bullet was buried. The monsters asked their parents to look under the bed for Chuck Norris. The Infinity Stones are just Chuck Norris's kidney stones.
Satan, yes, Lord! Why is Chuck Norris not in heaven yet? I did send Death to take him, and Chuck killed him. Chuck killed Death. Yep, hanged his scythe on the wall next to the grizzly bear. You mean stuffed bear? No, Chuck has a bear statue in his house, which is an actual live grizzly bear that's too afraid to move. Oh, my me. I also sent the Reapers to get him. Okay. He's hiding under Chuck's bed. And that's it. He's just hiding there, refuses to come out. Get Chuck when he sleeps. Oh, Chuck doesn't sleep. He waits. Oh. I did send my scariest demon to get him. Yeah. Chuck strangled him with a cordless phone. How? I finally sent Liam Neeson to get him. And Liam got taken. He did not have good luck. Chuck also punched my Cyclops between the eyes. We should probably leave Chuck alone. Looking for me. Chuck! We were just... Don't let us interrupt your shower. I don't take showers. I take blood baths.
Chuck Norris's heartbeat sounds like the U.S. national anthem. We Googled the last time a baddie defeated Chuck Norris. 0 results. Chuck Norris is able to start a fire using an extinguisher. When Chuck Norris turned 18, his parents moved out. Chuck Norris memes will die when Chuck Norris says it will. When Chuck Norris tips the waiter falls down. Chuck Norris's GPS never tells him to turn around. When Chuck Norris misspells something, it becomes a new word. Chuck Norris doesn't fart, because nothing escapes Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris spoke a braille in Morse code. Chuck Norris found the last digit of pi. Chuck Norris can repeat the numbers of pi backwards. The sun has to wear sunglasses when Chuck Norris glances at it. Chuck Norris once punched a Cyclops between the eyes. Chuck Norris hates ties. He prefers wins instead. Ghosts tell Chuck Norris stories. It takes Chuck Norris 20 minutes to watch 60 Minutes. Chuck Norris is the only person who can divide by 0.
Chuck Norris was exposed to COVID-19. COVID-19 had to go into quarantine for a month. Chuck Norris does, in fact, use a stunt double, but only for crying scenes. Chuck Norris doesn't flush the toilet. He scares the crap out of it. Chuck Norris went skydiving and his parachute didn't open. Chuck took it back for a refund. Chuck Norris can make sticks by rubbing 2 fires together. When Chuck Norris lifts dumbbells, they get smarter. Chuck Norris picked an apple from an orange tree and made lemonade. When Chuck Norris was a baby, he farted for the first time. That is when the Big Bang first happened. Chuck Norris didn't call the wrong number. You answered the wrong phone. Chuck Norris didn't cheat death. He won fairly and squarely. Chuck Norris walked into chemistry class and ripped the periodic table of elements off of the wall. Why? Because the only element Chuck Norris needs is the element of surprise. Chuck Norris once wrestled a bear, an alligator, and a tiger all at once. He won by tying them together with an anaconda.
Chuck Norris sleeps with a pillow under his gun. Chuck Norris has a diary. It is called the Guinness Book of World Records. When Chuck Norris goes skydiving, he uses a parachute. That's because 65 million years ago, he didn't use one, and look what happened to the dinosaurs. Chuck Norris's security guards pay him for protection. Chuck Norris wears sunglasses so that his eyes won't hurt the sun. Chuck Norris knows Obama's last name. If you're not following us, Chuck Norris is disappointed in you.
Chuck Norris can have a conversation in sign language blindfolded. When Chuck Norris was born, he would have been an identical twin, but the twin stayed inside because there's only one Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris learned how to fight before he learned how to walk. Chuck Norris climbed Mount Everest in 15 minutes. He spent the first 14 building a snowman. When Chuck Norris went to college, he told his father, "You're the man of the house now." Chuck Norris died 40 years ago, but death didn't have the guts to tell him. Chuck Norris knows Victoria's Secret. Chuck Norris can see John Cena. John Cena can't see Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris knows how much wood could a woodchuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood, because he tried it. When it's 6:59, Chuck Norris still has 41 minutes to get to school. Chuck Norris doesn't use sand in his punching bags. He uses concrete. Chuck Norris can make tornadoes spin backwards.
Chuck Norris's keyboard doesn't have a control key because nothing can control Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris uses pepper spray to season his food. Chuck Norris once had a staring contest with a statue. The statue blinked. Chuck Norris told a story when he was drunk. Now it's called Game of Thrones. Time waits for no man, unless that man is Chuck Norris. When the tooth fairy comes to your house, she takes your tooth and gives you money. When Chuck Norris comes to your house, he breaks your tooth and takes your money. Chuck Norris once pissed in the fuel tank of a semi-truck as a joke. That truck is now known as Optimus Prime. Sharks have to get in a cage to swim with Chuck Norris. Some kids pee their name in the snow. Chuck Norris can pee his name into concrete. Chuck Norris doesn't wear a watch. He decides what time it is. Guns sleep with Chuck Norris under their pillow. Chuck Norris doesn't mow the lawn. He stares at the grass and dares it to grow. Chuck Norris built Rome in one day. When Chuck Norris goes to your house to visit you, you're the guest. Chuck Norris wears glasses so that his eyes won't hurt the sun. Follow me for daily jokes. Chuck Norris can tie his shoes with his feet. Chuck Norris doesn't play hide and seek. He plays hide and pray I don't find you. When Chuck Norris plays Monopoly, it affects the actual world economy. Chuck Norris tried to lose weight, but Chuck Norris never loses. If you spell Chuck Norris in Scrabble, you win forever. Industrial logging isn't the cause of deforestation. Chuck Norris needs toothpicks. Chuck Norris had to stop washing his clothes in the ocean. The tsunamis were killing people. Hand sanitizer kills 99.9% of germs, but Chuck Norris can kill 100% of whatever he wants. Some people like to eat frogs' legs. Chuck Norris likes to eat lizard legs, hence snakes. He who lives by the sword dies by the sword. He who lives with Chuck Norris dies by a roundhouse kick. When Chuck Norris wants an egg, he cracks open a chicken. Chuck Norris grinds his coffee with his teeth and boils the water with his own rage. Chuck Norris does not eat. Food understands that the only safe haven from Chuck Norris's fists is inside his own body. When Chuck Norris creates any online account, the terms and conditions agree with him. Chuck Norris gets four-wheel drive out of his bicycle. Chuck Norris once got pulled over for speeding. He let the officer off with a warning. Chuck Norris never lost his virginity. That's because he never loses. Chuck Norris can download hardware. Chuck Norris can do a wheelie on a unicycle. When 911 has an emergency, it calls Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris donates blood frequently. It's just never his own. Oedipus's mother has a Chuck Norris complex. How many push-ups can Chuck Norris do? All of them. Chuck Norris tells Simon what to do. Chuck Norris's tears can cure cancer. Too bad he's never cried. Chuck Norris can win a game of Connect 4 in 3 moves. Chuck can never have a heart attack. His heart isn't foolish enough to attack him. When Chuck Norris was young, his parents would sleep in his bed when they were scared.
Chuck Norris doesn't care about gas prices because his car runs on fear. Chuck Norris went to court, and after just 1 hour, the jury was sentenced to life in prison, with no possibility of parole. When Chuck Norris's phone rings during the cinema, they pause the movie. A deaf man opened the door when he heard Chuck Norris knock. When Chuck Norris's parents had nightmares, they came to his room. Chuck Norris can break a Nokia. There was once a Category 5 hurricane approaching the coast of Florida, but it was just Chuck Norris running laps in the Atlantic Ocean. When Chuck Norris calls 911, he will be the one asking what is the emergency. Chuck Norris can strangle someone with a cordless phone. Duolingo learned languages from Chuck Norris. If Chuck Norris falls into a river, Chuck Norris doesn't get wet. The river gets Chuck Norris. Chuck versus Zlatan, comment the winner.
You know, they say Chuck Norris is so tough, there's no chin under his beard. There is only another fist.
That's ridiculous. Chuck Norris?
Chuck Norris died 5 years ago, but death was afraid to tell him. Chuck Norris can throw a right hook with his left hand. Chuck Norris's daughter lost her virginity. He got it back. Chuck Norris doesn't age. Age Chuck Norris's. Mark Zuckerberg already had a friend request when he created Facebook. It was from Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris doesn't do handstands. He picks the earth up. Chuck Norris was once hospitalized because he kicked his own ass. Chuck Norris went to jump off a plane with parachute, but it didn't open. The second day, he went to refund it. If you're not following us, Chuck Norris is disappointed in you.
Chuck Norris killed 2 stones with 1 bird. I remember an interview with Norris about all the jokes. He loved them. The interviewer asked if he was fast enough to run around the earth and punch himself in the back of the head. Chuck Norris replied, "No, I'd hear myself coming." Chuck Norris can pick up a missed call, and you better answer. How many push-ups can Chuck Norris do? None. He can only bench press the earth. When Chuck Norris opens an account, they have to accept his terms and conditions. Chuck Norris actually died 10 years ago. The Reaper is just too scared to tell him. Chuck Norris does not have near-death experiences. Death has near Chuck Norris experiences. When Chuck Norris was born, he drove his mother home from the hospital. When Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone, he had 2 missed calls from Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris went to the Virgin Islands. Now they're just called the Islands. Chuck Norris was in a knife fight. The knife lost.